Hello, Instagram. My name is Marie Tuan, and I'm a dating and relationship coach. I'm also the author of What is Compersion? Understanding Positive Empathy and Consensually Non-Monogamous Relationships. And today I have the honor of being joined by Dr. Shaun Miller, who is the creator of the Instagram account Coffee and Research. And he is the author of a brand new blog that I had the great pleasure and honor to publish on my site, whatiscompersion.com, which is all about framing compersion as not only an emotion, but as an orientation to relationships. And I just think this blog is sort of miraculous. And I'm saying that because I really think that some ideas, some pieces of writing can really open up new worlds of thinking and new landscape of understanding. And that is one of those pieces. So I'm going to invite Dr. Shaun Miller to join me. He is a philosopher, coffee fiend. So I brought my coffee for this conversation, and hopefully we don't have any technical difficulties. Oh, there you are. Hi, Shaun.
Hi, Marie. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank
I'm
you.
great.
How are
Thank,
you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for inviting me on this wonderful journey again.
Thank you. I'm just so odd. Like sometimes I will come across a piece of writing in my life and it will ignite something in me. And I just feel like, oh, wow, like this writing is so important and I want everyone to read it. And your blog is one of those pieces. Like, I'm very, very genuine when I say, like, it blew my mind open. And I just think everyone needs to run and read it. It's short, but it's so potent. Um, so thank you for giving me the great honor of publishing it on my site, which is whatiscompersion.com, where I like to curate a collection of blogs that I think bring a whole new, unique perspective on compersion, beyond the basic definitions. So really, thank you for putting so much thought into that piece. Uh-oh, are you frozen? Oh no. I don't know if I'm frozen or Shaun is frozen. Oh, I think we're gonna have to log out and log back in. I, I think, okay, he's coming back. Hello? Oh my God, you're back.
Okay. For some reason, it was just a weird fluke. Yeah, but I'm back.
Good.
But I did hear everything you said. I was just not able to participate. But I wanted to say I appreciate the invite for me to post on your blog. And it's one of those ideas and insights that as I was thinking about, I was just like, huh, this leads into this idea, this leads into this conclusion, this leads into this thought, and it just kind of exploded in my mind where, wow, all of this is just heading to this direction, and in many ways, it kind of surprised me too on that conclusion where compersion could be seen as an orientation alongside with as an emotion as well.
Yes, that is such a world-expanding idea. So I want to ask you all about it. But first, for folks who don't know you yet, I just would love for you to introduce yourself. What do you do in the world? What are you passionate about?
Yeah, so as you said, my name is Shaun Miller. I am a lecturer in philosophy at Iona University, and I mostly teach philosophical classes, mainly geared towards ethics and helping students understand their ethical import and their ethical activities in the world. Now, my research is not only in ethics, but it's also geared towards the philosophy of love and sexuality and gender and how those play a role in our ethical attitudes and how those ethical attitudes can also inform our loving relationships, our views of sexuality, and our views of gender. So that's mostly what I've been thinking about and researching and teaching all at once.
This is so fascinating. Like I mean, we need to actually go for coffee sometime and just like really geek out on all of that because I feel like we could just spend the next 2 hours just. I want to ask you all about what that means and how you've been conducting that research. But I also want to ask you, because I feel like it is so relevant to the piece we're talking about in Compersion. And what is your relationship to the concept of compersion, or what's your historical relationship to the concept? Like, how did you become interested in compersion in the context of your philosophical inquiry about love, sex, and gender?
I started to know about compersion when I delved into polyamory and non-monogamy. When I was thinking about it and researching it, this was way in the early days of, let's say, circa 2003, 2004. So very, very early. And it wasn't really thought about philosophically.
Mhm.
I don't even know if it was really researched at an academic level. It was just a lot of people who were exploring it and giving their personal reflections and their personal attitudes. And they uh, not only informed what polyamory means or what it means to be non-monogamous, but also these other terms that came with it. And one of them was compersion. And when I learned about compersion, it was just the idea that was considered the opposite of jealousy. And so I learned that. I was like, oh, that's an interesting term. Okay, I'll just put that in my memory bank, right? And then I continued on just learning more about relationship. Didn't really think much about exploring it deeply at a philosophical level. Um, it wasn't until maybe about, I want to say 4 or 5 years ago, where the academics of polyamory just exploded. And then I thought, oh wow, there's lots of explorations that you can do with this academically, philosophically, and psychologically. And I had a lot of colleagues that were researching and discussing like the philosophy of polyamory. And one of my colleagues, he delved into compersion and wanted to explore that deeply. And I knew that he was writing about it, and I kind of skimmed through it, but I didn't really take that on as a academic level per se. I thought this is an interesting piece of work. It wasn't actually until I read your book that was a huge academic, but also very approachable work on what compersion is, and that just opened up more minefields on, wow, this is something that can be discussed at a broader level, especially when you bring in those three definitions that I didn't know that compersion could be seen as a way to have this relationship interaction in any context. And so with that, I went back to the previous literature on what people have said about compersion, and it just kind of filled in the gaps and also helped me leap into these other avenues that I didn't think about before. I just thought of compersion was, oh, another feature of polyamory. So that's how it all started. It was just a build up. And then as soon as that build up was exploded, I went back to the previous stuff and then just kind of filled in the gaps from there.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my gosh, that is so cool because I also feel like my own kind of intellectual evolution in regards to compersion was very enhanced and kind of, like exploded when I realized that compersion was not only about polyamory, it was a phenomenon or an attitude, not just an emotion, but it could also be a way that we approach relationships and a way that we treat people. No matter what type of relationship we're in, but but that it can be a choice. It's not just an emotion that sometimes pops up, sometimes doesn't, and it's only for those like poly folks.
Right.
And to me, like that kind of explosion of understanding meant that, well, on the one hand, this is a concept that was sort of nurtured and coined and developed in the context of non monogamy, but it has so much bigger implications. But also kind of selfishly, I'm like, oh, it also helps normalize non-monogamy because, like the implications are so wide and yet, it has its roots in that polyamorous context or subculture. And I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah, I was always in the mindset that it was always in the realm of polyamory.
Hmm.
And it was always in that framework. And so I thought only a handful of people were to be able to experience that emotion. And then later I learned, oh, it could be just an attitude, this ethical attitude more specifically. And that's what helps expand the term to a broader application than just this emotional aspect. Yeah.
So, how then did you go from reading my book and reading about the three definitions of compersion, going from, oh, it can be an emotion, it can be an attitude or a behavior, or it can be any of this, but, in any context, to thinking about compersion as an orientation to relationship or, like a sexual orientation? Like, tell me more about that leap.
It was actually the last couple of pages in your book where you mentioned that compersion can be seen as an orientation toward relationships. And that just really resonated with me. And I never thought about it as an orientation. So I thought, well, let's explore that. What does that mean? And it started off by thinking about just with the typical framework of how we're familiar with orientation. And that's sexual orientation. That's the most typical way to think about it. But as time has gone on, we've also learned that there's a romantic orientation. And so we can look at two frameworks of orientation. And one has to do with sexual attraction, the other one has to do with romantic attraction. But as the debate continues, we've seen is it possible that kink is an orientation or that polyamory is an orientation? And that debate has been around for a while, but I was wondering, well, let's suppose that it is an orientation. That means it's not attraction to a specific sex or gender, either sexually or romantically. Now it's broader where the attraction is geared towards either power dynamics or having different partner numbers. And so you get away from the traditional sex gender attraction and it just widens the field to different attractions that you have. Now, that was one thing I was thinking. The other thing I was thinking of, well, let's just see what orientation means at the beginning. And I was thinking, just kind of looking what orientation was all about. It's in a very general way, it is just a direction that you are aiming towards. And that direction, especially when it comes to personal orientation, is something that you feel good about, is something that you enjoy. And so, with that general view of orientation, it's almost as if a lot of things could be in orientation.
Mhm.
And there are lots of people that just feel this aim and this direction of automatically feeling happy when others are happy. It's
Mhm.
this sympathetic joy that's usually repeated and somewhat synonymous with compersion,
Yeah.
where it's this automatic disposition that people have. And so if they are aimed toward that, if that's just their natural inclination or their natural disposition, then that could be seen as an orientation. And so I just wanted to explore what that direction looked like on how compersion can be not just this emotion you feel, not just this attitude that you have, but a disposition that almost feels like a natural inclination to that direction that you're aiming towards in regards to relating to other people.
Oh, that's so interesting because you used the word natural disposition.
I should probably put some quotation marks.
I mean, that brings up the whole debate about,
It
is
does.
orientation something that's wired, biologically? Like, is it nature or nurture? And I I'm curious about your relation to that debate or with that, like dichotomy in regards to compersion. Like, do you think it is something that people are naturally wired to do to share the joy of others, or do you think that's more of a choice and an ethical orientation that you might say like, well, no, even though I'm not really happy for you, I want to show up like this because that's, in alignment with my chosen values.
That's a big question. Yeah. I think, well, when it comes to sexual orientation, and I think with romantic orientation, and maybe even just in general orientations overall, I think it is going to be this interplay of some biological aspects, but also some social construction as well.
Mm-hmm.
The way that I look at how one thinks about sexual orientation is I think it can vary for a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
There are definitely people who just say to themselves, I don't need to think about it. I know what I'm sexually attracted to. I am gay or I am straight. It's just almost intuitive to them that they can immediately sense who they are and what they are and whom they're sexually attracted to. But there are also lots of people, and there's lots of evidence that shows that they really don't have that immediate intuitive sense of who they are attracted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so they have to more or less think about it and reflect on it, but also take those experiences and interpret it in a way where they say, oh, those experiences that I had, it turns out that maybe I am gay, or maybe I am bisexual, or maybe I am aromantic. And that interpretation is kind of part of where I cash in the social constructionist view.
Mm-hmm.
And that interpretation helps them delineate how they see themselves as having this sexual or romantic orientation.
Mm-hmm.
Now, play that into either kink or polyamory or compersion. I think the same thing could be said as well. There are people who said, I knew I was kink at the beginning, I knew I was polyamorous without any doubt in my mind. I'm pretty sure there's people who felt that the sympathetic joy just intuitively, immediately.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then there's also people who thought, well, I don't know, I have to think about it. And as they interpret their experiences, they eventually realize, it turns out I actually am polyamorous. It turns out I really am compersic. And so that is a lot of reflecting, interpretation, and this realization that, oh, this is what I am. That could have biological foundations, but I think a lot of the social construction behind it is interpreting how they see themselves. Well, that's just one exploration I was thinking about when I was thinking, how does one think about themselves either sexually or romantically or relationship-wise?
Oh my gosh. I want to go into a little bit of a rabbit hole with you on this because now my brain is bringing me back to conversations I've had, both in my research and in my coaching conversations with people. And you did ask me if I had any quotes from my research to support that idea, and I'm still working on that. But now that we're talking, there definitely were people in my research that said not only like polyamory or non-monogamy is an orientation for me, it's something that is just so clear. It's always been clear. I've never been able to be monogamous, and I didn't think there was a word for it, but when I discovered the word polyamorous, then I realized like, that's me and that feels right and that's just who I am. Just like, someone who, like discover, like knows that they're not straight and they know that they're trying to fit into the heteronormative world and they never feel comfortable with it. But then, okay, like once they can own their identity, that's this relief, and it's not something that's mutable or, that ever will be put into question. Um, but beyond that, and just to contrast that actually with some other people who are non-monogamous, but for them it feels more like a choice. dependent on context. Like maybe their partner became non-monogamous or was non-monogamous and they decided to explore it and to adopt it because they felt like they could or should or wanted to. And they just feel like they have that flexibility there. But when it comes to compersion, I actually have met many people, and I'm not one of those, even though I'm a compersion researcher, but I've met people who really came to me and said, like, compersion is who I am. You know, like I just really, and oftentimes it was in a sexual context where they said, I really get off, I really get turned on when my partner is turned on with someone else. And to me, that is the biggest turn on, like that vicarious turn on, that vicarious joy, that vicarious excitement was the thing that they really felt like they craved the most in their sexual and romantic life to an extent, but I think it was more in the sexual realm. And that was interesting to me to have someone tell me, like, this is not just who I want to be or who I'm orienting towards or a side benefit or an outcome of being polyamorous. That's nice because I think most people who experience compersion will say, like, yes, I'm poly because I want to. It is, you know, comfortable to me. It makes sense, and I get to have more lovers, and my partners get to be free. And you know, like compersion is like this bonus. If I can feel emotional compersion, it's like this cherry on top. It makes everything feel so much better, and it's great. But they don't necessarily position compersion as this first goal or this first like this is who I am kind of thing. So all that to say, I have met people for whom compersion feels like an ingrained identity.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Just using that as an analogy with people who are polyamorous or kink, I have known people who felt that being kink was just so ingrained into them that they could not do vanilla just because it's just out of their realm or something that they didn't aim toward. And same thing with polyamory. I could easily see that being done with kink, where being compersic, where having compersion is now just ingrained into who they are, and that's now how they carry themselves in the world, rather than other people who are compersic, where it's now an added feature instead of and something they had to develop instead of this thing that just almost felt innate or just something that felt as part of themselves, part of their identity.
Right, right. And your conceptualization of compersion as an orientation, you know, like it goes beyond non-monogamy, right?
Right. Yeah, I think it can go to a lot of contexts. Yeah.
So would you think that some people who prefer monogamy or choose monogamy or even are monogamously oriented can also be compersically or compersively oriented at the same time?
That is such a good question. I was thinking about this. Is it possible that um, being compersic can be done monogamously? Um, I think for the definition for any context, definitely. There's definitely people who can be monogamous and can be compersic in any context. I am happy when certain friends or family members are happy because something good happened to them, and so I'm happy for them. But how about for any sort of extradictic partner, where that's usually framed in the realm of polyamory? Um, and I actually don't know how to answer that, because I'm trying to imagine a case where someone is monogamous, but yet they're still happy that their partner is either dating or sleeping with someone else. And imaginatively, I could see them saying, yes, I'm happy for them, but also in my mind, I'm thinking, but that just sounds, um, it just sounds like that they wouldn't want to enjoy that. So I don't know how to fully answer that, but I think possibly if I delved into the framework of certain traditions, I was reading about how compersion or sympathetic joy, um, through this Buddhist lens, could be seen as a way of having this compersionic lifestyle. And part of Buddhism is to have these enriched um, developments and character traits so that you can live out this Buddhist life, and you will try to let go of these sufferings and these desires that cause it. And sympathetic joy is one of them. And I think maybe through that framework it could, but I don't want to limit myself into thinking that someone who's monogamous can experience compersion only within that Buddhist lens, because that just sounds so restrictive. So that is all to say is, I think it's possible, but I would have to cash that out a bit more. I'd have to flesh it out a bit more to see what that looks like. Just because it sounds, on the one hand, counterintuitive, but imaginatively, I think it could work. Uh, what do you think, Marie?
Well, I think yes. I mean, when I look at your blog, and by the way, this is Shaun's blog over here. It's really lovely, and you can find it. It's not very long, it's just so potent. Um, and when I look at your blog and you talk about, well, relational ontology, being through connection, I'm just going to read a little excerpt. To me, it leads to thinking that yes, someone who's monogamous can be compersively
Mm,
oriented. Um, okay, so I'm just going to read a little bit of your blog
sure,
here.
yeah.
We accept compersion as an orientation. We're talking about a general disposition towards others that goes beyond specific relationship contexts. It becomes a way of being in the world that's characterized by four things. One is taking joy in others' positive experiences. Number two, approaching relationships with a collaborative mindset. Number three, prioritizing mutual flourishing over zero-sum thinking, which, yes, it's a Buddhist concept, but we can think it outside of Buddhism. And number four, maintaining an open stance towards others' connections. So I think then, like, does it apply to a monogamous person? I think that if a person chooses to be monogamous for themselves, um, they can still have compersion for their partner if that partner doesn't choose to be monogamous. And, that number four, maintaining an open stance towards others' connection, like basically like wanting other people's joy and other people's flourishing, um, sort of no matter what that looks like, I guess, even if that means that this person would have a relationship with someone else romantically. Um, I think that someone who's monogamous could orient themselves like that. And, in practice, if you have a monogamous couple, they can also be very much oriented towards each other's flourishing within the boundaries of monogamy. So I think, overall the answer is yes, but I I also hesitate to say, like if we define monogamous as like, well, I'm monogamous, but I also need my partners to be monogamous too, that might be where compersion stops.
Okay. And that framework, yes, I think I agree. Where um, if you have a couple where one is monogamous, the other is polyamorous, and they have no problem with the other person being polyamorous. And there's compersion just flying everywhere, and they are happy about the other experiences and the other joys. I'm on board with you. Yeah. Yeah, it's where I'm monogamous and I want my partner to be monogamous. That's where it gets dicey for me too. Yeah.
Yeah, that's where maybe like it's conditional compersion.
You're right. It is conditional, it seems.
Which in reality, I think that's where, like all of us are going to operate. Like even though I think to have a fully compersive orientation is ideal and it's a really nice idea to aspire to, I mean, how many of us can say that our compersion is completely unconditional?
Right.
I think that the goal is to make it broader and broader and broader and to have, less conditions.
Yeah, it's very rare to have someone experience um, unconditional love, unconditional peace, unconditional ways that there's no anger dispositions or negative dispositions towards the other, but you try your best to expand that love or that justice as much as you can. I think compersion works in a similar fashion. Yeah.
Yeah. So I also want to ask you a little bit about this part of your blog, rethinking the opposite of compersion, because of course traditionally we always thought about compersion as the opposite of jealousy. And oh, cheers, by the way.
Cheers.
Are you drinking coffee?
Yes.
What kind of coffee do you drink?
um, this is Indonesian coffee.
Oh,
It's from Sumatra, and so it's just made from a local brewery here in Brooklyn. So it's nice.
nice.
How
You
about
wear
you?
your Instagram handle very well. Yeah, I'm just doing French
Oh,
press.
perfect, wonderful.
Normal Trader Joe's organic beans, French press.
Yeah, that works.
Yes. Cheers.
Cheers.
So yes, in your blog you talk about compersion then not being the opposite of jealousy as a result of this idea of compersion as orientation. Can you say more?
Yeah. So I think if you looked at compersion as purely in the realm of emotion, the opposite, the closest opposite would be something like jealousy. If you looked at compersion as an attitude, where you take on the roles and responsibilities and the behaviors of being compersic, then the opposite of that is not necessarily jealousy, but it's more about being somewhat egotistical
Mhm.
and not trying to show any sense of care or compassion towards others. It's trying to um, absorb and assume their happiness for your own sake. And so when I was thinking about compersion as an orientation, I was thinking, well, if orientation is all about this ingrained disposition where you're just feeling innately or naturally inclined to be happy when other people are happy, that's someone who's just generous, compassionate, and always in this joyful mode of living. Well, what would be the opposite of that? That would be someone who's like just kind of a miser
Mm.
and someone who just does not experience any sort of joy when other people are happy. In fact, they feel the opposite. They just don't like that attitude that people have, and they have no sense of generosity, and they just want to take it all and absorb everything for themselves. And my mind immediately went to the misanthrope, just someone who just does not care, just this hatred, if they would go to that extreme of humanity. And over the weekend, I was just thinking more about this, and it's probably a cliche, but the perfect example would be someone like Ebenezer Scrooge from A Christmas Carol. Like at the beginning, he was a misanthrope, and
Yeah,
then when
and
he
I
had that change of heart, oh
yeah, and I feel
yeah,
like the miser, I feel like that image is so evocative, like that
it
kind of
really is.
misanthropic, like I just want to hoard everything for myself
Mm-hmm.
idea, that
Yeah.
archetype. And I never thought about the word miser and misanthrope kind of next to
Mm.
each other, but they probably have the same root.
They probably do, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And as soon as Scrooge just kind of goes through that transformation, he all of a sudden becomes generous and kind. And so, I mean, the book ends, but I could see him slowly developing compersion just towards the people around him as soon as he had that conversion with him. And I think that's a perfect fit of how he just changes and just transforms himself through that. Instead of becoming a miserly human being, he now becomes compassionate and sympathetic and joyfully sympathetic towards others.
Yes. Yes. And as you wrote in your blog, kind of getting out of that zero-sum mindset, because that kind of scourge or miser character, feels like, well, more for me, is more important, or I mean, more for you is less for me. So I have to hoard and be greedy and try to get as much as possible for myself because, we're not sharing. Like, more for you is not more for me. And I think that is so much of what is sick with our world and our economy and our politics, like if we zoom out big level, like that is such a strong energy that dominates our world, is that miserly, greedy, like separation energy, that says, like we have to just fare for ourselves and, like we can't share, we can't afford to share because then, like other people are our enemy, ultimately. It's very misanthropic.
It is, yeah. That would be someone who is just the total opposite of compersion. And I think compersion and being misanthropic is kind of like a spectrum, and kind of the way you saw compersion as a spectrum. I don't think a lot of people have this unconditional compersion. And I don't know if there's like the majority of people who are misanthropic. I'm pretty sure there's lots of people who are, but I'm pretty sure that there's a lot of people who are just like within that spectrum of being either neutral, or they help out when they can, or they might be just miserable, but they still have this hope of being helpful. So I think it does have a spectrum of this, if you want to look at it this way, this orientation of where they fit.
Mm. Yeah, and that's such a crucial topic, and the question then becomes like, how does someone who notices some misanthropic tendencies and decides that they want to cultivate compersion or a compersive, you call it compersic attitude, I like that word. How do they develop that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think they would have to go through some exercises and learn how to obtain that disposition, how to reframe their mindset of, I now have to associate this action with the right feeling. And it's going to be a long process, but I think you start with the actions first, until it gets almost like a habit, and then hopefully the joy or the sympathy just kind of attaches itself with it. I know towards the end of your book you've given lots of great exercises of how to learn how to develop compersion. And I think those are some great steps of developing that disposition. And once that's developed, then hopefully that joyful, affective feeling comes along with it, so that it just expands into that enriched disposition.
Yes, thank you for that. Yes, I have a whole chapter. It's called Can Compersion Be Learned? And there's 7 different points that I give, and one of them that I want to emphasize is learning by example. Surrounding yourself by people who have that orientation or that attitude or that behavior can go a long way to just like igniting that possibility for people who might never have imagined that they could experience compersion. And while that is, like taken in a polyamorous context, I think it also applies to other relational contexts, like surrounding ourselves with people who have that kind of frequency, who vibe, like that, who share other people's happiness, who are happy for others when good things happen, I think can go a long way to starting to kind of rewire our whole system because we've grown up not only in a mononormative society that, says monogamy is the only way to love, but we've grown up in a very individualistic society that says that, again, more for you is less for me. So it does take a lot of unwiring, unlearning, and then rewiring to something very different. So that is really sacred work in my book. And I think your blog is also something that can be so helpful to people who want to ignite those ideas and be inspired. Because I think ideas and words and concepts can sometimes be like the first ignition of a possibility for us. It doesn't mean that going out and doing the actual work and acting it is easy, but it's like opening a window or a door and then being able to walk through that door. And I want to also read for folks like another little excerpt from your blog because I think it's just so delicious, so good, so inspiring. So at the end, you say, in a cultural moment, you do talk about the cultural moment, often characterized by isolation and division. Cultivating a compersive orientation represents a radical philosophical stance, one that affirms our interconnection not as an incidental fact, but as the very ground of our being. By choosing to orient ourselves towards others' flourishing, we don't just transform our relationships, we reimagine what it means to be a human in a world of others. So well said. And then the question remains open. Can we cultivate compersion not just as an emotional response or an ethical commitment, but as our fundamental way of being with others? The answer, I believe, lies not in a philosophical abstraction, but in the daily practice of remaining open to joy, both our own and that which flows through the lives around us.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. So it's a great way to conclude that essay.
yeah, so good.
Yeah, I was thinking that with an orientation, it's not just the attraction. It's not just an attitude or behaviors. It is a fundamental mode of who you are. It's a way of existing in the world where that existence is now a different approach to how you not only see the world, but how you see other people. And how you see other people is now more related. It's now to the point where you don't just see yourself as an individual with another individual, but now there's that immediate connection that you have just by going through that training or that learning, so that you now reorient yourself to that compersic way of life.
Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of that fundamental, like going from feeling separate and isolated,
Mhm.
like ontologically, fundamentally as a person, to feeling connected to the whole. And not only that, but feeling connected to a benevolent whole,
Mhm.
that actually can feed you and can include you in a positive way. And by the way, someone else wrote a guest blog a couple of years ago for my blog on whatiscompersion.com, and they talked about pronoia
Mm.
as very connected to compersion as an element of compersion, because pronoia is the opposite of paranoia. Like paranoia is fearing that everything and everyone is out to get you or harm you. And pronoia is the opposite. It's this idea that, actually the world is on my side. The universe is on my side. And that's kind of controversial or potentially problematic idea. Like it can be very Pollyanna, like, yeah, that's a very privileged thing to say. The world is on my side. Yes, I'm not getting bombed. I have a roof over my head. I'm drinking nice coffee. Of course, I can think that. And not everyone maybe has that luxury. But still, I think that idea of having a compersive attitude and saying yes to connection with the whole and saying yes to, like, yes, I want to make other people's happiness my own. And that means actually, like, it's hard to say, yes, I'm going to make other people's joy my own, but I'm not going to say yes to making other people's pain my own, right? It's like, if you're going to say yes to feeling connected with humanity, with other beings, you have to say yes to everything,
Mm.
right?
Oh, that's so interesting. yeah, I mean, another way of thinking of compersion that's always cashed out is this sympathetic joy. And so I was thinking, well, being sympathetic is to um, not take on the same feelings as the other person. That's more like empathy, but it's to understand where they're going through from their perspective.
Mhm.
And if you add the sympathetic joy, it's feeling joyful if they are being happy, feeling joyful because you can now understand their perspective. And yeah, you definitely don't want to take on the pains of the other because there's no joy behind that. There might be some sympathy where you could say, "Oh, I feel bad," or "I can understand why this is not a good situation for you." Um, but to but to take on the ever well to take on everything
Mhm.
that the other person has, I think that just seems a lot. It just seems way too much. I think the compersion is just going to be focused more on the joyful aspects.
Yeah, it's gotta have it cut off somehow.
Exactly.
Oh, Shaun, this is so interesting. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. I really, really appreciate you contributing this beautiful blog to the world. And again, if people want to read it, it's on whatiscompersion.com, and it's called From Emotion to Orientation, Expanding Our Understanding of Compersion by Shaun Miller. It's really, really one of the best pieces of writing I've ever encountered about the topic, and I think I've read most of what's out there about compersion. So it's really, really worth it. Please, you all go and read it and follow Shaun here on Instagram at Coffee and Research. And, if you're new to me, maybe you came from Shaun's account, like follow me. I'm Dr. Marie Twine, and I'm a compersion researcher. Um, I'm the author of this book, What is Compersion? Understanding Positive Empathy and Consensually Non-Monogamous Relationships. I do want to write another book at some point, sooner than later, and I think I want to also open up the discussion on compersion a little bit beyond consensual non-monogamy. So thank you for helping me start to really like germinate and develop those kinds of ideas, because it's so beautiful, so timely, so important in our world. Always been, but I think right now more than ever.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me and having this great discussion. This also inspired me to expand on this topic, and I'm thinking of making this into a wider article and to see if that can get some traction. And that will be something that I'll explore, and I'll also announce on my Instagram page. So for everyone who's following me, just take a look out for that. But this was a very enriching discussion, and thank you again for inviting me to write on your blog and to explore this idea with you.
Thank you so much. To be continued.
To be continued.
Cheers. Cheers, coffee, research,
Cheers.
compersion. Have a good rest of your day, and thank you everyone for logging on. Bye.
Bye.